from St. James in Red Bank, New Jersey, connecting faith and life. And you're watching Real Faith TV!
When I hear about a terrorist attack, I feel very upset with the world and like what has happened, because it saddens me that people think that they can just go around and do whatever they want without any regard to anyone else.
I feel it's terrible and disgusting that someone could do something so terrible and evil to somebody in this world and ruin the lives of others.
To think that people can just do that because they want to really is upsetting.
The terrorist attack that affected me the most was 9/11, because a lot of people were involved in this area and it was a horrific event.
Our God would not want us to participate in malicious acts against innocent human beings. I don't think God would take sides because we are all children of God.
The terrorist event that affected me the most was the Sandy Hook shooting, and this man wasn't really mentally stable and he shouldn't have been out on his own, but he was, and the whole thing didn't really have to happen.
The 9/11 attacks really affected me because it made me realize how close we are to New York. So it really shows that it could happen at any time and any moment, and you never know what's gonna happen.
It's just very terrifying, and it's just a feeling you'll never ever get from anything else.
I think the attack on Paris was the terrorist attack that stood out to me the most, because I've been there before and it really just affected me because I didn't want to see a city like that destroyed.
Well, terrorist attacks and impact everyone's faith, because when in times of need, your virtue and your faith grow stronger with God, because you're trying to help everyone, and God loves when you help everyone.
It seems like every other week now, suicide bombings, mass shootings, and other acts of terrorism dominate our headlines.
Whether these attacks occur inside our country or abroad, we are immediately shocked by what seems to be horrifying and senseless violence.
And deeply saddened when we hear of the innocent casualties, many of them usually everyday people just going about their normal activities.
Terrorist attacks shake us to our core because their design is to cause fear and anxiety.
They force us to consider our response if and when we are faced with similar atrocities.
They leave people questioning where next, and are we safe here?
They make us question God. Where was he? Why didn't he prevent this?
Sadly, in the 21st century, the threat of terrorism seems inescapable with constant media coverage and ever-increasing security measures.
How are we, as Catholics, supposed to respond to terrorism?
How can we hold on to a hope for peace when it seems like violence is erupting all around us?
Where is God in all of this, and how can he help us?
Where is God in the midst of terror? That's what we'll be talking about today. Hi, everyone. I'm Emily.
And I'm Christian.
And this is Real Faith TV.
We'd like to thank the God Squad from St. James Church in Red Bank, New Jersey, for helping us open our show today.
And for sharing the way they view acts of terror and how some attacks in particular have impacted them.
We'll hear from them as part of our wildcard segments. But first, let's meet our spotlight guest, Sean Sanford.
He'll share with us why we need God to turn to during times of fearfulness brought on by terrorism in our world.
Let's hear him now.
When things happen, whether it's a terrorist attack or something else that makes us fearful, I think God is who we can turn to for consolation. God is where we can turn to realize that we don't have to be afraid, that we shouldn't be afraid. I think in reality, being angry and being upset is just part of being human. And sometimes where we don't know where to put that anger or where we put that sort of sense of anxiety and being upset, we direct it towards God. And what I always tell people is God is big enough to handle it. You know, God can take our anger and our fear and even sometimes our sadness and do remarkable things with it. So when people ask, why did God let this happen? I always respond, God didn't let this happen. People made choices. And, you know, we were given free will as an act of love by God so we could achieve our full humanity. And so often it's easier to blame God than to take an account of what's caused the problem in our world. But there are times where we can't figure out why something happened. And when that happens, you know, I think it's normal and it's human to say, why did God let this happen? Most important thing is to be rooted in hope and try and work through your anger, not to stay in a place of anger, because the dangerous thing is to stay angry. It's okay, it's a normal human reaction to get angry when bad things happen, but how do we get from that place to a better place? That's what we're called to figure out, and that's what our faith helps us do.
I feel like a lot of times people use God as a scapegoat and they think that, oh, he's to blame for all our problems. But in actuality, God is the one that's trying to help us get to heaven because that's his ultimate goal for us. Mm-hmm. Well, let's see what our studio guests have to say about this topic.
Okay, they are Caroline,
Ryan,
Juliana,
Rebecca,
and David. So how do terrorist attacks impact your faith and relationship with God?
I know when I get scared, I question God as well. Was he there? Was he there to help those people?
Yeah, like you guys were saying before, I think it's like a lot easier to just blame someone, and I think the easiest person to blame is God because he has the power, and sometimes I wonder like why he doesn't step in, so it's easy to question that.
My faith has never really been too shaken by a terrorist attack. I understand that people have free will and that sometimes people use that free will to choose to do evil things. And that's not God's fault.
I believe at the same time, as your faith can weaken during a terrorist attack, it could even strengthen. Because after a terrorist attack, sometimes the first thing people do is pray. And by praying like that, your faith in God can really strengthen.
There's no question that terror not only causes us fear and anxiety, but shakes our faith.
They cause us to doubt God's involvement in our lives and sometimes even his existence altogether.
It is even more difficult to understand that some of the most devastating attacks are done in God's name.
To bring about radical interpretations of God's commands as if God chooses sides and wants one faith to wipe out another.
It is during these times that it's easy for us to feel abandoned and question why God would allow such suffering.
But it is when we look to those who are reaching out to help others, assisting people to safety, and providing comfort and support that we can see the face of God.
Our first wildcard guest is Camille, a member of the God Squad from St. James Parish.
She'll share her mom's experience during her ordeal on September 11, 2001 in New York.
And how the kindness of others helped her bring her mom to safety.
Terror is obviously a horrible thing, but I know sometimes it can bring out the best in people. When my mom was 7 months pregnant with me, she was going to work like every other day in the city. And while this was going on, a plane had just struck the Twin Towers, and she had no idea what was going on. Everyone was coming around her, noticing she was pregnant, and they were telling her not to breathe in the smoke, covering her mouth with tissues and just pushing her out of the way so she can get to safety. She got on a ferry, and obviously she was all right, and I'm all right. So I think the kindness of strangers really helped me be healthy and why I'm still alive today.
What a profound, heroic story of safety for her mom.
Mm-hmm. So which terrorist event stands out to you or has affected your life the most?
I think for me, one that really stuck out was the terrorist attack in France because it happened at like a soccer stadium, and that could easily have happened here in America because like I know from my personal experience, like I go to a lot of football games, baseball games, basketball games, and where a bunch of people are crowded together, and that's kind of what they target. So that one kind of really stuck with me and hit home.
Yeah, I think we talk about 9/11, like it happened so long ago, but it's one of the few that like happened so close to home. Like we see the ones that happen overseas, like in France and Germany, and like we think that that couldn't happen to us. It's so far away, but like things that happen here in Orlando and New York, like it's so close to us.
One of the ones that really affected me the most was actually also the one in France, because at that time, a group of my friends were all together in France, and I had no idea where in France that they were. So there were a couple hours where I had no idea if they were near the attack or where they were, but they turned out to be on the other side of the country, so they were fine. But
9/11 was hard for me because even though I was only like 1 year old, like Julianne said, it was so close to home, but also like having family members in the towers who luckily survived, and I thank God every day that they did. But it's still a scary thing.
Same for me. My dad was a first responder for 9/11, and because of it, he had a lot of bad health issues, and it really affected my family, and it still does to this day.
I think a lot of the shootings are, since they're so common now, that almost people are getting, like, they're starting to cope with them. They're not being as shocked as they used to be seeing that there was a shooting. Now they're almost so common that you see them every day.
It's like they're almost used to them, essentially. In the Gospel of John, chapter 4, Scripture tells us to cast out fear.
When fear starts to creep in, we need to turn to God in prayer.
It might also be helpful to share with friends or family what you are feeling.
Odds are you are not the only one experiencing fear.
Opening up to others can help you let go of the fear and turn to God, not just individually, but as a family and community.
Next, our spotlight guest, Sean, talks about this natural tendency to be fearful in the midst of chaos.
And how we shouldn't be controlled by our anxiety, but rather in the trust we place in God.
So it is totally normal to be scared. It's totally human to be scared. As a matter of fact, science tells us that built right into us as human animals is this idea that when we get scared, we either fight or flee. We either run away or we fight. And so being scared is something that happens to everybody. And anybody who tells you that they've never been scared is someone that you probably shouldn't believe. So when the scriptures tell us, one of the most common themes in the Bible is be not afraid. And when the scriptures tell us that, they're not saying don't ever be scared. They're saying don't live a life controlled by fear. You know, if we give our lives to God and we put our lives in God's hands, we have an opportunity to be completely free to live as we're supposed to. And in doing that, we have total trust in God. And so it's not about not being scared ever. It's about saying trust. Trust in the God that loves you. Trust in your community of faith. Don't let fear control you. Don't let fear control you, whether it's from terror or a personal situation you have. You know, St. Ignatius of Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits, in his famous spiritual exercises, talked about aligning the things that we desire with God's desire for us. And when we align those two things, when they come together, we find our true freedom. But that means sometimes having to give up the things we want and identify the things that we really need to be our full selves. And so for me, be not afraid means let go of your hang-ups. Let go of the things that can't be reconciled to God's will for you. Listen to the still small voice of God calling you to live a life. And in the end, don't be controlled by fear, because in the end everything will be well. It will resolve itself according to God's plan for the world.
I really agree with Sean in that, like, you can't live in fear, because if you live in fear, life will pass you by, and you just really have to trust God, because he's got your back. He knows what's right for you and what will lead you to heaven, so you just got to trust him.
So how does our faith help us to understand acts of terror or why other bad things happen in our world today?
Well, in going off of what Ryan said, my faith in God, I feel, can be strengthened in terroristic events, because I tend to lean on God more, pray more, stay by him, because I know he's always by my side, and I feel like this is always the right thing to do.
I know my faith strengthens when I see all the love and outpour from people all around the world, and we almost come together as one big community, almost like when Pope Francis was at the 9/11 memorial and he did a big prayer circle with a bunch of different priests from different religions, and it was really an amazing thing.
I know during times of terrorism, my faith helps me understand that sometimes these events can help bring us together. Like in Scripture, it says, God closes some doors but opens up new ones. And I really see that, and sometimes during the events, how good can come out of it in the end.
Everyone definitely comes together as a nation whenever something terrible happens.
As Catholic Christians, we believe that at the end of the world, at the final judgment, God's plan will be revealed to us.
It's called the revelation of divine providence, and it will be a time when we see the good that came out of every bad thing that has ever happened.
God is so powerful that he can bring about good even from something so horrific as a terrorist attack.
We can see this in the outpouring of prayers and support from around the world in response to terrorist attacks.
We saw it in the way our country rallied together in the wake of 9/11.
We saw it in the people who put aside selfishness and shallowness and came together to care for and comfort others.
This is really just a small glimpse of God's hand at work through something tragic.
Next, Sean discusses the importance of prayer to help in our healing during any tragic situation.
And how our Catholic faith calls us to be better bridge builders.
So when attacks do happen, sometimes you'll hear people say that they're thinking and praying of the victims. And recently, some people have started to say, don't pray, act. Well, I'm a big believer that we have to start with prayer because as people of faith, we believe that prayer matters. So when I hear about an attack, the first thing I do is try to think and pray for the victims, for everyone who's suffering, and for the perpetrators. Because as someone once reminded me after 9/11, that God loved the people who did it as much as the people who lost their lives, which is really hard for us to believe. It's really hard for us to accept that. But God loves all of God's children. And so when one of these attacks happen, the first thing is to pray. And then the next thing is to say, what can I do to make the world a better place? Is it possible that I can be more loving and more affirming of people of other religious traditions, of other belief systems? Not because we caused it. We didn't cause it in that sense, but because we might be able to do something to prevent it. Can I make the world a safer place by arguing for rational gun control? Can I make the world a better place by not turning people who are gay and lesbian, and like in the case of Orlando, into enemies? They're not our enemies, they're our sisters and brothers, and we are called to love them just as much as anyone else. But when people act in a way that they are other, that they are different from us, it's easy for people to attack them and treat them like they're less than human. So we have to make sure we're not doing any of that kind of stuff. So when bad things happen, I think our faith is very helpful in a number of ways. One, it's a place where we can be consoled when we're scared. It's a community that we're part of that can love and support us. But also our faith, our Catholic Christian faith, reminds us that bad things do happen. Bad things happen to Jesus, bad things happen to us, bad things happen to everyone. We live in a world broken by sin. And so when sin happens, we have to turn to God for reconciliation and forgiveness. And our faith provides that too. We can be reconciled to each other. We have the sacrament of reconciliation. There's so many opportunities to build bridges with each other, with God, with people of other traditions. So my faith is what kind of inspires me when violence happens to try and be a bridge builder to other people.
It's so common to think that we as ordinary people can't do anything about the tragedies that happen in the world, but as Catholics, we can spread love and do good in order to keep that hope alive.
Absolutely. As Christians, our hope is anchored in Christ. Even in the midst of terrorism and tragedy, we can keep going knowing that we were not made for this world full of sin and darkness.
The things of this world will pass away.
We were made for the light and glory of heaven.
We need to be the guiding force and to take care of one another.
Next, our second wildcard guest, Cameron, shares with us his father's experience while being in Manhattan on 9/11.
And how he is grateful to God for helping him stay strong during that tragic day.
So on the day 9/11 took place, my dad was actually on the island where the planes hit, and he had to get off, and he actually got on a ferry, and he got home to my family, which was great. I was only 1 year old, so things could have ended badly if maybe he wasn't off the island in time. So I'm just really grateful for everyone who stayed strong and pitched in to help everyone get off the island where there was a lot of danger. And I'm really grateful for God for giving everyone that strength and the power to get to do that, even in this time of terror and all of this pain and death.
Have we become desensitized to terrorism?
Yeah, I think that nowadays it's almost so common that we're not so scared anymore, but some people are still afraid, but they're so used to it, and they don't have the same reactions as they used to as the first time from 9/11. Like, their reactions are much different now.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's happening so much that there are repercussions to it as well. Like, you see it happening overseas and you think, hey, this isn't really going to happen to us. And then the repercussions of that is that we become naive almost as a society that we don't need to be on guard as much since it's happening overseas. But all the time, whether you're in a highly populated area or there's a bunch of people around. You really need to keep your eyes open and ears as well, and just always be aware of your surroundings.
Another thing is like some people, when terrorist attacks happen, become like really angry. But I feel like that's also a repercussion because it sometimes it doesn't really help. Like getting angry like that almost makes the situation worse.
Adding fuel to the fire.
And it's not even other terrorist attacks that are desensitizing us to more terrorist attacks. It's also the way violence is portrayed so openly in TV shows and movies, where killing people has just kind of become something we're used to watching.
It's become very commonplace in everything that we watch and all the media that we make ourselves available to. Lastly, our spotlight guest, Sean, explains where he finds God during the darkest of times.
And challenges us to be beacons of hope.
So one of the hardest things to do when something bad happens, especially if there's a terror attack, is to pray for the perpetrators of terror. Because it's a lot easier to think, oh, these people are animals, they're not even human, they've done something terrible. But as people of faith, our job is to try and look at them through God's eyes. And it's very hard to do that, right? Because God looks at them as his children and loves them unconditionally. May not be happy with what they've done, definitely isn't happy with what they've done. I'd like to believe that when people suffer, God cries along with them. God loves us so much that walks with us on our journey of pain and suffering. It's not easy. It's not easy at all. And I think it takes a lot of faith and a lot of discipline to find yourself in a situation where you can pray for your enemies. But it's what God asks us to do. Jesus told us to turn the other cheek for a reason. Not only was it something that he taught, but it's something that he lived. And I think that as Christians, our job is to follow the footsteps of Christ. And so, as hard as it is, it's something we need to try and do. For me, hope is probably the single most important part of my spirituality. You know, whether it's because of terrorism or because of people who are suffering or because of just tragedies that I've experienced, without hope, we become filled with darkness, we become people who despair, we lose our opportunity to live happily and joyfully. So hope for me is something that's rooted in God's plan for us, rooted in God's promise that we will be taken care of and we will be loved. Even if we don't know how things will resolve, how things will get better, if we have hope. Now, the most important part of that, though, is not sitting back and saying, everything's gonna be fine. I have hope, so everything's gonna be fine. It's saying, I have hope, and because I have hope, I'm going to try and work towards a better world. I'm going to help reveal the kingdom. I'm going to live out my faith. So hope is both a thing that gives us a sense of security, but also something that causes us to work for a better world and for a better situation for ourselves and for other people.
I think Sean is absolutely right. Our faith provides us with such a deep hope, especially to know that in these horrible times of crisis, God is right there next to us, and he's more upset than we are, and he's crying with us.
Yeah, I think our faith calls us to come together in times like terrorism like that, especially since our church is a community. I know at my parish, when every 9/11 there's a mass, and after the homily, they read off a list of the parish members that knew family members, friends, that were affected or lost their lives in 9/11, and I really, I like how they do that because it helps us come together and
keep them in remembrance.
Yes.
For me personally, such a tragic event can show true faith and hope. My dad has been through so much because of 9/11 and the health issues that came from that, and he's one of the most faithful people I know. His faith in God has definitely gotten him through, and he has so much pride for his country, and I have so much pride just being his daughter. I don't know.
Yeah. And I think like what Sean was saying before, that it's great to have hope and everything, but like we can't just sit back and relax. We have to like act on that hope.
As St. Paul wrote in this letter to the Romans, overcome evil with good.
Want to do something? There are always ways to help.
There are many organizations that support people in crisis, whether it is terrorism-related or natural disaster-related.
Catholic Relief Services and the Red Cross are two great starting places.
Find out if they are sending support to the area affected by a terrorist attack.
Find out how you can help.
How do you show the hope of Jesus even in the midst of terror?
Share your story with us.
Contact us at realfaithtv.com.
Or share your thoughts with us on Twitter.
And we will leave you today with this final thought.
Pray. Pray for those affected by the terrorism everywhere, no matter how big or small.
Pray for all of the first responders, many of whom put themselves into harm's way when confronting attacks.
Pray for the people who commit the evil acts, that they may experience the love of Christ and seek his forgiveness.
Pray for peace and justice, because there are so many people affected in a terrorist attack. We should make an effort to have our prayers touch every one of them.
Remember that no matter how terrible the situation, Pope Francis offers,
from my point of view, God is the light that illuminates the darkness, even if it does not dissolve it.
And a spark of divine light is within each of us.
So let that light shine, and even in the midst of doubt, confusion, and fear.
Thanks for watching.
We'll see you next time on Real Faith TV.
God bless.
The average text takes your eyes off the road for nearly 5 seconds. Stop the texts. Stop the wrecks. Visit us at stoptextstopwrecks.org.
Listen to me. I am captain of the track team. And if I'm late...
She doesn't really think she's going to get out of here, does she?
Be nice. She's new. Hello, is anyone there? Ugh.
Wow. Even from our standards, you look awful.
Oh, sweetie, what happened? Me? My friend Becky got to talk to this super cute boy, and I tried to act like I wasn't jealous, but I so totally was. And then out of nowhere, this concrete barrier just popped up. Maybe it was a semi.
You mean you were driving?
Yeah. I mean, I know the whole eyes on the road thing, but this was a super important text. Maybe you have to know, Becky.
Texting? Great.
But it was only like 5 seconds, and I'm a really, really fast texter, so it wasn't even a big deal. Actually, has she texted me back yet? Wow, I get like no bars in this place. I wonder if they have Wi-Fi here.
Pretty much a good day for me would be people leaving their hands off of me. I'm always called names. Everywhere that I go, there's always someone calling me names, calling me gay. I've been choked, thrown up against a wall, punched. Nobody's ever tried to help me.
Can you help me with this? My new dad teaches me all kinds of stuff.
Sure.
He helps me with homework.
That would be 3.6795.
Thanks.
Yep.
He helps me with my decision making.
I wouldn't use this one. Ever.
And he's even teaching me how to drive.
And that's why cars have bumpers.
I'm learning so much.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of kids in foster care will take you just as you are.